There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that healing is not just about what they do, it's about where they stand. Pain has geography, hurt has an address, and sometimes the bravest thing you will ever do is pack up your emotional bags and leave the place where your heart learned to shrink. Healing requires safety, not strength. We grow up believing that the people who overcome pain are the ones who learn to be tougher, louder, more resilient. We're told to push through, to swallow the discomfort, to be so strong that nothing gets to us. But real healing has nothing to do with how much pain you can carry. It has everything to do with whether you're in an environment where you no longer have to. Pain doesn't dissolve by being ignored, minimized, or muscled through. It dissolves when your nervous system finally stops bracing for impact, when you are no longer scanning every moment for danger or preparing for the next emotional blow. Healing is an internal unfolding that can only happen when the external world feels safe enough for you to let go. Think about a wound on your skin. If you keep touching it, brushing against it, or exposing it to harsh conditions, it never closes. It doesn't matter how strong your body is, the wound stays open because the environment keeps hurting it. Emotional wounds work the same way. You can be the strongest person in the room and still not heal if the surroundings are constantly triggering the same pain that broke you in the first place. Safety is the soil where healing grows. It's the quiet moment where your body realizes it doesn't need to protect itself anymore. It's the gentle conversation with someone who actually listens. It's the absence of chaos, the freedom to feel, and the permission to rest. Healing begins when you don't have to explain why you're hurt, defend your pain, or apologize for having a tender heart. Strength can carry you through survival, but survival is not healing. Strength keeps you standing in storms you should have walked away from years ago. It convinces you that if you endure long enough, things will get better. But endurance is not transformation. Endurance is what we do when we believe we don't have a choice. Safety gives you a choice. When you step into safe spaces, whether that's a new environment, a supportive friend, a therapist, or simply solitude, you give yourself permission to finally unclench. You stop fighting for space and start allowing yourself to feel what you've avoided for so long. You notice the parts of you that have been muted by fear. You rediscover the softness you buried under armor. Healing looks like breathing without tension. It looks like not second-guessing every word you say. It looks like nights where your mind quiets enough for you to sleep. It looks like trusting that you can be fully yourself without being punished for it. And here's the truth, strength is still valuable, but not in the way we were taught. Strength helps you walk away from what hurts. Safety helps you rebuild. Strength is the door. Safety is the home. You don't heal because you are powerful enough to endure the harm. You heal because you finally found a place where harm no longer lives. Familiarity is not the same as belonging. It's easy to stay in situations, relationships, and environments simply because they are known. The routines feel predictable, the faces are recognizable, and the patterns, no matter how painful, are patterns we've learned to navigate. There is a strange comfort in the familiar, even when the familiar is breaking us. But just because something feels known doesn't mean it feels right. And just because you've adapted to a place doesn't mean you were ever meant to stay there. Familiarity can trick you into believing you're home. You know how to move around the emotional landmines, how to read the subtle shifts in tone, how to shrink yourself in the exact ways that prevent conflict. You know which version of yourself is accepted and which parts of you must keep hidden. You know the rhythm, even if the rhythm exhausts you. But belonging is different. Belonging doesn't ask you to edit yourself to be tolerated. It doesn't require you to dim your light so others don't feel threatened. Belonging is where your presence doesn't feel like a performance. Many people stay in familiar environments because walking away feels disloyal to the history, to the memories, to the version of themselves who tried so hard to make it work. But you don't owe your life to a place that doesn't honor your heart. You don't owe your peace to a space that only knows how to take from you. Familiarity is often nostalgia mixed with fear. Nostalgia for what once felt good and fear of what stepping into the unknown might reveal. But healing, growth, and becoming who you are meant to be all require that you step into spaces where you can expand, not shrink. Belonging is where you feel seen without trying. It's where your strengths are celebrated, not resented. It's where your softness isn't used against you. It's where you don't have to constantly translate your feelings or justify your needs. Belonging is where your nervous system relaxes because there is no threat of emotional punishment. It's where you can breathe without calculating the cost. When you confuse familiarity with belonging, you stay too long. You tolerate too much. You convince yourself that the pain is normal, that everyone feels this way, that this is just how life works. But deep down, you know the truth. If you belonged there, you wouldn't feel so alone inside it. If you belonged there, you wouldn't feel drained after every conversation or silenced every time you speak your truth. If you belonged there, you wouldn't have to bargain with yourself to stay. Belonging is not an emotional prison. It's a place of freedom. It's where you can bring your full self, your wounds, your growth, your dreams, your uncertainty, and still be welcomed. And the moment you experience real belonging, you realize how many familiar places were actually harming you. Leaving what is familiar is not abandoning your past. It's honoring your future. It's choosing the life your soul deserves over the life your fear has settled for. Walking away is an act of self-respect, not an admission of defeat. We're taught to stay, to hold on, to push through discomfort as if endurance is a badge of honor. We're told that leaving is what people do when they've given up. But the truth is far simpler and far more courageous. Sometimes walking away is the moment you finally decide to stop abandoning yourself. It's the moment you choose your dignity over your fear, your peace over your patterns, your future over your history. Leaving a situation, a relationship, or a place that hurt you is not about proving anything to anyone. It's about recognizing that you are no longer willing to negotiate the value of your own heart. It's about understanding that constantly explaining, proving, or justifying your worth is not love. It's emotional labor disguised as loyalty. When you walk away, you're acknowledging that your well-being is no longer up for debate. People often stay because they hope things will change or because they believe they owe it to others to tolerate mistreatment. They convince themselves that enduring more pain will somehow fix the situation. They believe that if they are patient enough, kind enough, forgiving enough, the story will rewrite itself. But pain doesn't transform because you tolerate it longer. Pain transforms when you stop feeding it with your presence. Walking away doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough about yourself to stop participating in cycles that diminish you. It means you were brave enough to break your own patterns, even when those patterns were familiar. It means you finally chose to protect the parts of you that were slowly being worn down by disappointment, disrespect, or indifference. And sometimes, the hardest part is that walking away doesn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it feels lonely. Sometimes it feels uncertain. Sometimes it feels like you're letting go of a version of yourself that fought so hard to stay. But self-respect often grows in silence, in the moments after you leave, in the quiet places where your soul finally exhales and says, "Thank you." With distance, clarity comes. You begin to see what you were tolerating, how much you were giving, and how little you were receiving in return. You see the ways you minimized your feelings to keep the peace. You see the ways your boundaries blurred just to maintain connection. And you realize that although walking away required courage, staying would have required the constant sacrifice of your own well-being. Self-respect is not loud. It's not dramatic. It's a steady knowing that you deserve to be treated with gentleness, honesty, and care. It's the quiet decision to remove yourself from spaces where you are only valued when you're convenient. It's choosing a life where your worth is recognized without needing to be proven. Walking away is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of the part where you finally protect your heart the way it has always protected you. It's the moment you choose yourself, and that is the deepest form of self-respect there is. You don't grow where you're constantly shrinking. Growth requires room, emotional, mental, and sometimes physical space. It needs enough air for you to breathe without fear of judgment, enough warmth for your confidence to open, and enough encouragement for your voice to rise. But when you live in an environment that demands you make yourself smaller in order to be accepted, tolerated, or loved, you begin to lose touch with the parts of you that were meant to flourish. You start editing yourself to fit the comfort of others, and in that shrinking, the dreamer in you slowly suffocates. We shrink when we are surrounded by people who treat our feelings as inconveniences. We shrink when our ideas are dismissed, when our boundaries are mocked, or when our worth is questioned. We shrink when we sense that the real version of ourselves is too much, too emotional, too ambitious, too honest, too passionate. And after a while, the shrinking becomes automatic. You stop raising your hand. You stop speaking your truth. You stop asking for what you need. You stop dreaming bigger because you have learned that your dreams make others uncomfortable. But shrinking is not the same as peace. It's not humility. It's not maturity. Shrinking is self-betrayal disguised as harmony, and it steals your potential in small, quiet pieces. You cannot grow when you're constantly calculating how much of yourself is safe to show. You cannot grow when your energy is spent trying not to upset the dynamics around you. And you certainly cannot grow in a place where you must abandon your authenticity just to survive. Growth happens in environments that welcome your expansion. It happens around people who celebrate your evolution, not fear it. It happens when you can be honest without consequences, when your curiosity is met with encouragement, when your vulnerability is handled with care. Growth requires spaces where your voice gets stronger, not softer. Places where your presence feels like a contribution, not a threat. It's important to understand that you can outgrow a place without it being bad, and you can outgrow a place precisely because it is bad. Some environments simply do not have the emotional oxygen for you to thrive. Some relationships rely on your smallness to function. Some patterns were built around an older version of you who didn't know her worth yet. And when you finally start to grow, you begin to see how cramped those spaces really were. Stepping away from environments that shrink you isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's choosing your future over your fear. It's choosing to become the person you were meant to be rather than the person others find most convenient. You owe it to yourself to go where you can stretch, rise, and breathe deeply without apology. You don't grow where you're constantly shrinking. You grow where your presence is allowed to take up space. You grow where your roots can reach and your branches can spread. And the moment you stop shrinking for others, you begin to expand into the life that has been waiting for you. New environments create new possibilities, often in ways we don't expect until we step into them. When you leave a place that has limited you, emotionally, mentally, or even spiritually, you open a door that your old surroundings could never offer. Sometimes we stay stuck because our environment keeps repeating the same story to us. It tells us who we are, what we're capable of, and how much we're allowed to dream. But the moment you step into something new, the script changes. You begin to see yourself differently because the world around you sees you differently too. There's a reason people feel lighter when they change jobs, move homes, set new boundaries, or distance themselves from unhealthy relationships. It's not because they magically became a new person. It's because they entered a space where growth no longer feels like a threat. A new environment invites curiosity. It encourages experimentation. It offers perspectives you didn't know you needed. It becomes a mirror that reflects not your old wounds, but your potential. Your environment shapes your patterns more than you realize. In a negative or restrictive space, your energy is spent on survival, trying to avoid conflict, trying to be enough, trying not to disappoint anyone. There is no room left for creating, dreaming, exploring, or expressing your authentic self. But when you step into a new environment, your nervous system adjusts. It relaxes. It learns that not every conversation leads to conflict, and not every mistake leads to punishment. Suddenly, you have mental bandwidth to explore who you might be outside of fear. New environments also introduce you to people who expand your thinking. People who speak to you like you matter. People who remind you that your sensitivity is a strength, not a weakness. People who encourage your growth rather than shrink it. And sometimes the new environment isn't filled with people at all, sometimes it's solitude. Sometimes the new environment is simply a quiet room where you finally have space to hear your own thoughts without interruption. Solitude itself is a transformative environment because it gives you the chance to rebuild your identity from the inside out. When you leave what hurt you, your world doesn't immediately become perfect, but it becomes possible. Possible to try again. Possible to see yourself with kinder eyes. Possible to reimagine your life without the limitations that others placed on you. You start to realize that your old environment was not a reflection of your worth, only a reflection of its own limitations. What felt like your ceiling was just the height of the room you were standing in. It takes courage to step into new environments, especially when the unfamiliar feels uncertain. But uncertainty is often the birthplace of transformation. When you walk into a new space, you give yourself the chance to grow without apology, to evolve without fear, and to create a life that feels aligned with who you are becoming. New environments create new possibilities because they give you permission to rewrite your story. And your next chapter can only begin once you leave the place that tried to keep you trapped in the last one. Choosing yourself is the first step to recovery, and often the hardest one. For so long, many of us are conditioned to prioritize others, their needs, their comfort, their expectations, while quietly abandoning our own. We learn to make ourselves small for harmony, to stay quiet for acceptance, and to endure pain for the sake of maintaining relationships that no longer nourish us. But healing begins the moment you decide that your well-being is no longer negotiable. It begins the moment you choose yourself, even if that choice feels unfamiliar or uncomfortable. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It isn't an act of defiance or rebellion. It's an act of returning. Returning to your boundaries, your values, your truth. It's saying, I matter too, in a world that taught you to disappear for the convenience of others. It's acknowledging that your needs deserve attention, your heart deserves care, and your peace deserves protection. Recovery, emotional, mental, or spiritual, cannot happen as long as you keep abandoning yourself for the sake of belonging. You cannot heal if you are constantly betraying your own feelings to keep the peace. You cannot grow if you are silencing your voice to avoid being misunderstood. Choosing yourself is stepping back into alignment with who you really are, not who you learned to be in order to be tolerated. At first, choosing yourself might feel selfish because you've been taught that everyone else comes first. You may feel guilty setting boundaries, stepping away, or saying no. But guilt does not mean you're doing something wrong. Guilt often means you're doing something new. When you've been conditioned to self-sacrifice, self-care feels unfamiliar. But recovery thrives in unfamiliar territory. It grows in the discomfort of changing old patterns, not in the comfort of repeating them. Choosing yourself can also mean disappointing people who benefited from your silence, your compliance, or your emotional labor. And that is part of the process. Not everyone will celebrate your healing. Not everyone will understand your boundaries. Some will resist your transformation because it disrupts the version of you they were comfortable with. But recovery is not about keeping others comfortable. It's about finally giving your soul the space to breathe. When you choose yourself, you stop settling for relationships that drain you. You stop accepting apologies without change. You stop making excuses for people who keep hurting you. You stop romanticizing environments that require you to abandon your truth. Instead, you begin to surround yourself with experiences that honor your growth, with people who encourage your healing, and with habits that nourish your emotional well-being. Recovery is not a single moment, it's a series of choices. Every time you honor your boundaries, you are choosing yourself. Every time you rest instead of pushing through exhaustion, you are choosing yourself. Every time you speak your truth, walk away from disrespect, or simply listen to what your body and heart are telling you, you are choosing yourself. And slowly, those small choices build a new life. A life rooted in clarity rather than confusion. A life grounded in peace rather than chaos. A life shaped by self-respect rather than self-neglect. Choosing yourself is the first step to recovery and the step that makes all the others possible.